Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Coffee Chat with Matt. So I thought I would come to you today with fall garden prep type talk, sort of the do's and don'ts of, fall landscaping, fall maintenance, things like that. So I got a whole bunch of topics that we'll cover today, just a kind of a wide variety of things. So what should you be doing in the garden right now? Number one, as I just mentioned a moment ago, is planting. And there's a lot of things that you can be planting right now. Trees, shrubs, and even perennials take really well to being planted at this time of year. We're getting close to that time of year where perennials may not take. So you really want to get them in as soon as possible. You probably have another couple of weeks. The reason that this time of year is so good for planting is that the ground is still quite warm. So even though it was, I think, 41 degrees last night, the soil temperatures are really quite warm. And that warm soil encourages root growth. So whether it's a tree or a shrub or a perennial, anything like that, you get it in the ground now while we still have some good sunlight and while the soil is warm. It's going to root in quickly. The reason it's going to root in is because the top of the plant, the leaf and stem growth and things like that, that's all done for the year. In fact, in a lot of cases, plants are already entering dormancy and in some cases may even be dormant. It's also one of the reasons why at this time of year we don't recommend applying a lot of insecticides or fungicides for leaf problems on trees and shrubs. So at this time of year, I get a lot of people sending photos or bringing leaf samples in with spotting on leaves or munched up leaves and things like that. And at this time of year, the tree or the shrub, whatever plant the leaves came from, they're basically done in terms of producing energy, sugars, etc., that are going to be stored in the roots. They're pretty much done for the season. They're going to start shutting down. They also shut down a lot of their natural defenses against leaf spot diseases and insect attack and things like that. So you might see powdery mildew on a plant that doesn't normally get it or didn't have powdery mildew all season. Maybe some of the viburnum and things like that. You might see some leaf spotting on some of the broadleafed Amsonias, and you might see some munch marks on viburnum, and maybe there's a little bit of spider mites or something like that on the back of the foliage on a plane tree or sycamore. None of those things really need to be worried about it at this time of year because within the next couple of weeks, all of those leaves are going to be falling off anyway. So we don't want to unnecessarily use the chemicals there. So one of the don'ts is don't spray insecticides and fungicides at this time of year. On the flip side, though, if you do have actual diseased foliage on a plant, perhaps you have a hosta nematode, or perhaps you have earlier in the season developed some type of bacterial infection or fungal infection on a macrophylla hydrangea. It doesn't really matter what the plant is, but one of the things that we like to do in the fall is to get rid of diseased foliage. We don't want that to sit on the ground. We don't want that to compost. So we want to get rid of that stuff. On the flip side, seed heads and leaf material that is healthy can be left all throughout the wintertime for, habitat for insects and birds and all that kind of stuff, as well as for forage. So, there's a lot of especially native plant material that has, whether it be a berry, a seed head of some kind, maybe coneflower. We love our coneflower around here. Obviously, that's a native plant. And the coneflower seed head is a favorite of the goldfinches, among other birds. But so I like to leave those, even though they're black and kind of dead looking at this point. I leave those up all winter and let the finches and other birds munch on those all throughout the winter. So I've got a big patch of coneflower in the front of the house. Let that go. I'm okay with the fact that it looks black or brown and dead and whatever because I know that the birds are going to eat it. Same thing with some of my ornamental grasses like my prairie dropseed. Great seed heads on that. Of course, they're still looking beautiful right now. They're green, just have a hint of yellow to them. They're going to start turning all sorts of yellow and sort of copper colors and very pretty grass, but I'm going to leave those seed heads all winter long as well. So if it's healthy material, you can, of course, leave that up. If it's diseased, go ahead and cut that down. This is also a great time of year to think about mulching. If you didn't mulch earlier in the season, or if you're just on a site where you get a lot of wind, a lot of rainwater that goes washing through a bed, and maybe it takes the mulch with it, things like that. If your landscaped beds, particularly trees, shrubs, and perennial, like mixed beds, if those beds are low on mulch, it's a really good time to get a little layer of mulch put down. It's ideal to go into winter with a 2 to 3 inch mulch layer covering the root system, especially of newer plant material, things that maybe have only been in the ground for a couple of seasons or less. Really good idea to get those a nice winter blanket. That mulch is going to act as an insulation barrier. It's going to help let the soil cool down slower in the fall. It's also going to prevent it from kind of going through sort of what I just call extremes. So you get like a nice sunny warm day in the winter. You don't want that soil to heat up too fast and plants start to think that it's spring and they start to maybe grow because we had a couple of nice warm days, and then it gets cold again. So that mulch layer will insulate things. So on those sunnier days in the wintertime, that soil will actually stay cooler, which in the winter is good. The plants will stay dormant. And then it also helps keep moisture in the ground. Speaking of moisture, we've had a little bit of rain the last couple of days, so I always like to remind everybody that an inch of rain is considered a good watering. We got nowhere near that, like nowhere near. I think here, I'm not even sure if we got a full 1/10 of an inch over the last 48 or 72 hours. So even though you may have been dodging raindrops, running your errands and things like that the last couple of days, we didn't get enough rain to really soak the ground, especially after that week of 80-degree temperatures that we had. So it is really important that your plants get a good soaking right now. It's a really good idea to water, especially newer plant material, things that were installed within the last 12 months. It's a really good idea to make sure those go all the way through October and well into November with moisture. So one of the don'ts on my list is don't put your hose away yet. I know that a lot of people want to kind of give up on the yard for the season and things like that, and maybe you're tired of dragging the hose around all year, and I get it, but it is really, really beneficial to the plant material to go into winter wet, especially if you're trying to develop a healthy root system. If that ground has dried out, it's really hard for those roots to branch off and get rooted in the way that you want that plant to. And it's doubly important for evergreens. Evergreens don't lose their leaves during the winter time, obviously. They stay green. And so, your spruce and your pines and firs and all of those kind of things, they want to make sure that they go into winter with really adequate moisture. Otherwise, they're prone to winter burn and even just leaf loss during the winter time. So that's a really good idea to be doing. Along those lines, we also have a product called Wilt Stop. There's also a product called Wilt Proof on the market. Both of those are what are known as anti-desiccants. So these are things that are going to help seal moisture into the leaf or needle of a plant. So it's really beneficial on things like boxwood, rhododendron, azaleas. If you have areas that are prone to high winter winds, or you've just been seeing a lot of winter burn over the years, or if it was something that was recently planted, Wilt Stop or Wilt Proof is a really good idea. You spray it on, it's a natural product, and it just helps seal the moisture in the leaf. For lack of a better term, it's almost like a varnish, so it just is like providing that extra barrier on the leaf surface to help keep the moisture in the leaf. So it works really well. I don't recommend putting that on really until late November, mid-November, something like that. You want to put it down as late as you possibly can without, you can't put it down when it's, below freezing, because it's a liquid product and it's just going to freeze up. So, try to get it down as late as you possibly can. It's a wonderful time of year to plant bulbs. It's something that we frequently get asked in the springtime. Everybody comes into the garden center. We have bulbs planted all along Route 64 by our entrance and along the road frontage. We have them in all of our parking lot islands and in a bunch of other areas around the garden center. And everybody sees all of those beautiful bulbs and they say, they start looking in the garden center, where can I find this? Where can I find that? I say, well, that's a spring bulb. It has to be planted in the fall for it to come up in the spring, and you have to buy it in bulb form. So these are things like, daffodils and tulips and snowdrops and crocus and hyacinth and all the more well-known varieties, but also all of the more rare varieties, things like fritillaria and, some of the alliums are really neat. I brought up a bag here of giant allium. This is one that we get asked a lot. We sell a lot of allium in 1-gallon pots, and those are your kind of traditional summer blooming allium. This is a fall blooming or a spring blooming allium that gets planted in the fall. So you get this giant bulb in here, and you can kind of see the flowers here. They're like the size of a softball. They're huge, but those get planted right now. So you just dig a hole, drop that in, cover it up, and let it go. That's it. I love to plant bulbs mid-October into early November. This is really actually a fine time now that the forecasted temperatures are a lot lower right now. So I'd love to get your bulbs planted at this time of year. And it's something that I commonly, when I talk to customers, they always say, oh, I've been meaning to plant bulbs and I always forget. So this is your reminder. Come to the garden center, get some bulbs. It's super, super easy. Also on my list is, if you haven't already, you definitely are going to want to bring in your tropicals or your house plants. Last night it got down to 41. The next few nights, I've seen some 36s and some 35s and some 37s in the forecast. So one night around 40 is not going to harm most tropical plants. In fact, I took a glance out the window. I still have some tomatoes on the vine that I need to pick today, but those plants all looked perfectly fine and healthy. However, they won't stay that way for very long. So, of course, I'm not bringing in my tomatoes. I'm just going to harvest what's left on there and then throw the plants onto the compost pile. But tropical plants and whatnot need to be brought in. It's a really good idea. If you haven't already, give them a good spraying of some generic or general all-purpose insecticide. Neem oil is a really good one for most houseplants. You can use things like 8. That's a really good insecticide that's kind of all-purpose. So get some insecticide, spray it really good. Of course, let it dry before you bring it in the house. Or if you've already brought them in the house and you forgot to spray them, it's warm enough during the daytime that you can bring those outside if they're not too terribly heavy. Bring them outside, spray them down real good, let it dry on the plant, and then bring it back in the house. I also like to put a systemic insect granules on the soil surface and sort of work that in with a little fork or something just to kind of get it into the soil. That's a really good method for preventing insect damage down the road. So the spraying is hopefully going to take care of anything that might be lingering now, and then the systemic granules will help for down the road. So some things it's perfectly fine to be pruning right now, but you really need to know what type of plants you have. On my list of don'ts are don't prune any early blooming plant material. So these are your forsythia, magnolias, most of your fragrant or all of your fragrant viburnum, lilacs. All of those kind of plants have already set their flower buds. In fact, they set them back, well before probably Labor Day. So those flower buds are set for next season. So if you go in there and you start doing pruning, you're going to remove those flowers from the plant for next season. It's not technically going to harm the plant. So, if you just bought a home and you have a big overgrown fragrant viburnum that really needs to be cut back, fall is a good time to do that because it's going to put a lot less stress on the plant, but you're going to sacrifice the flowers for a season, but it won't actually harm the plant. Other things that you can be doing at this time of year is starting to think about pruning on trees. If you were banging your head on tree limbs all summer as you were mowing the lawn, fall is a wonderful time as the plants start to drop their foliage and enter dormancy. That's a really good time of year to do some limbing up. That's just the process of taking those lower branches off of the tree and getting the stem height a little higher. So that works really well. I don't like to prune any evergreens really at this time of year, especially your foundation hedges, your arborvitae, boxwood, yews, things like that. And the reason being is that the outer layers of foliage on those plants have what we call hardened off and have developed a little bit, I just use the term tougher skin. And they're going to withstand the winter weather much better when you take off the outer layer of foliage on a plant at this time of year, specifically on evergreens. You're exposing some of the interior of the plant that wasn't getting all the sun and all the wind and isn't as tough. I kind of think about new fresh skin versus calloused over skin. And it's sort of that, same type of concept there where the exterior of the plant is just tougher, more durable to the elements. So we want to leave that on, at least during the winter months. And then if we need to do any pruning, give it a little pruning in the springtime late, very late winter when it's just getting ready to produce some new growth, which can then, cover over that. Another thing that we should talk about is animal damage, and I brought up one of these corrugated trunk protectors here. So this is a white plastic trunk protector. It's about 4 feet long. It's already slit vertically, and so you can take this and you can wrap this around the trunk of a tree, and this is going to do a couple of things. Number one use for this is to prevent deer damage. At this time of year, the deer are going to start rubbing their antlers on typically smaller, younger trees to do two things. One is to get the velvet off of their antlers. Most of the deer have already done that at this point. Most of the velvet is off. Number two is they're going to start marking their territory. We are getting close to the mating season for the white-tailed deer, and so the male deer are going to be going around. They are trying to mark their territory and say, I'm the biggest buck around. And the way that they do that, or one of the ways that they do that, is by scraping and rubbing trees. And if you've not seen this, they can do a lot of damage to a tree in literally just one night. So this is a perfect way and a very inexpensive way and reusable way of protecting that tree trunk. So very easy. Obviously with that slit, you just pull it apart, put it on the tree. I like to put this on in late September, early October, and for deer damage, that is. And then I like to take this off around Easter. If I'm just using it for protecting the trunk from things like sun scald, which is just the sun beating on the trunk of a young, thin-barked tree, and then in the wintertime on a sunny, warm day, it kind of heats up the water and sap that's underneath the bark, and so it thaws out, and then at night it freezes, and that you get expanding and contracting, and on young trees that can cause what we call frost crack. This is an excellent method for preventing that. It is white, which again is going to sort of reflect the sun rather than absorbing the sun. That's why we don't like to use black corrugated drain tile. We like to use this white, but it's totally reusable. It works really well. If you don't want to use that, or if you don't have deer damage, if you don't have deer damage, we also have a paper tree wrap. It's an asphalt-based paper tree wrap that can be wrapped around the trunk of the tree, secured with a little bit of tape. If you're just doing that for winter protection and aren't worried about deer, then I like to put that on typically around Thanksgiving and then take it off around Easter. So that's sort of the time frame for that. Couple of last things, fertilization. I like to cut off water-soluble fertilizers. If you're using any of those on your plant material, definitely would want to stop that. I like to use things like plant tone, which is organic and sort of a slow to break down and slow release. The organic fertilizers do not have really high levels of nitrogen, so they're not going to push any new growth at this time of year. So putting down fertilizers in the fall is excellent, especially if it's got things that are going to help the root systems too. So all of the tone products that we sell, all of the plant tone, tree tone, things like that, all of those have some beneficial bacteria in there. So they help the soil, they help the plants, and they break down very slowly, so they're not going to sort of juice up a plant like some of the water-soluble fertilizers, your salt-based, Miracle Grow type products. I also wouldn't want to be using anything that was synthetic, that was very like a coated fertilizer, like Osmocotes and things like that, because they're really going to have little or no effect because of how long it takes those coatings to break down. So you put them down, but they're really not effective at this time of year. And then maybe by the time it is effective, they've already, kind of washed away or something. So water-soluble fertilizers are a don't. Coated, Osmocote, high nitrogen type fertilizers are a don't. But definitely your plant tone, tree tone, holly tone, all of those, it would be wonderful to put those down at this time of year. So I think that's all I had on my list today. As always, if you have any particular questions, if there's something that I didn't cover that you're really curious about, that you want to ask, feel free to shoot a comment on this video, or you can text our store, or you can send an email to sales@wasconursery.com, and we'd be happy to try to assist you in that method. And then, of course, the store's open. We've got a ton of product out here. If you didn't already see our post about our gourds and pumpkins, we have, I would argue, probably the absolute best selection of gourds and pumpkins and fall material in the area. We grow our own pumpkins. They're absolutely gorgeous. We have every color, shape, size, and stuff imaginable. So maybe come by the store if you're looking to do a little bit of fall decorating too. And then, like I said, it's definitely still planting season. We've got lots of sales and specials going on, so check out our website for more details there. So thanks again for watching. Love being with you on a Saturday morning. Hope you get a chance to get outside.